we'll kick things off. Big one today we want to touch on is programming. Programming from the point of view of the coach, and then programming from the athlete point of view. We can touch on individual, we can touch on group class scenarios as well.
Yeah.
I think it'd be a good one to dive into for one, both ourselves to have a conversation on that, and a little bit of reflection, and then two, for people who are training or even other coaches, for them to get a bit of insight into how we think around programming.
Yeah.
I'm really going to try and guide the conversation a little bit today. But I suppose one of the biggest things with programming, we hear people say it all the time. What programming should I be following? What programming is out there? We're starting to see a lot more group programming coming from organizations. For instance, like CrossFit HQ has just released their programming for affiliates. Before that, we had Jason Kalipa had his programming. So you are starting to see a lot of that. And then you have affiliates that write their own programming, and you have coaches that coach and write programming for individual athletes as well. I suppose the first question, what are some of the major benefits of having a structured program?
I mean, the biggest thing is, to me, it's that exact word, is the structure, right? So if you're coming in and you're doing whatever's hot on the day, you're not really seeing any. You will see growth for a little while, but there's no structured improvement, like written down improvement. One of the major strength and conditioning principles is progressive overload. And for those who don't know, that is, if I do 5x5 back squats on week 1 at 80%, I'm going to do 5x5 back squats on week 2 at 83%. All right. So if you do the math on that, you're lifting more load over the week or on the following week. And that's that progressive overload that we're trying to progressively stress the system. If you're not following a structured program, you're not going to get that. You may hit it once in a while, out of just luck. But for the most part, if you're just coming in doing, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, some hot workout you found on Instagram that made you go, oh my God, that looks awesome. Yes, you will see newbie gains for 3 to 6 months. But then after that, you're going to start to stagnate. And the longer you train for, the worse it's going to get, because it takes more to actually get someone who's got a bit of a higher training age to actually adapt. And that's where you really need a structured program. And
the changes are smaller, aren't they?
So
they're harder to see.
Yeah, it can be tiny. I might do week 1, I might do 50 toes to bar. Week 2, the workout's got 60. It's 10 toes to bar. It's not a lot, but I'm progressively adding more and more volume to what I can handle. And you make those small changes over a four cycle training year. You might take your maximum recoverable volume of toes to bar from 50 to 120, and that's where you'll see those kind of benefits. But again, if you're just doing what's sexy, you're probably not going to get that over time.
Yeah. So would you say for general population and group classes, it's still important to have structured program?
Yes. I think the structure can get boring for general classes if people don't understand why, right? So I get it all the time, like, why are we back squatting again? We back squatted last Monday. Well, these back squats are different. We're lifting heavier, or we might be doing an extra rep or something like that. But
yeah, it might have a tempo.
Yeah, I think so. I think those strength progressions they're not crucial, but they are important, right? So you're still going to get better without it, but you're not going to get better as fast. And the same thing goes for conditioning, especially, actually. And you don't really see actual improvement. The other thing as well is some people will, one of the beauties of what we do here is it's measurable, it's repeatable, and it's observable, right? So if you're not doing the progressions and you're never actually repeating and observing, you're never going to see that benefit or that gain. So for me, I might go through a squat cycle and I'm like, oh, wow, 150 didn't feel as heavy this week. That's progress.
Yeah.
Right. But if you're not following that structured program, you're a lot less likely to see it. But short story or short answer, yes, I think it's important. I don't think it's 100% required. It kind of begs the question of if if people are getting bored with too much structure, there's no point in that because they probably won't stay.
Yeah, they're going to trade off consistency.
Yeah. So I had this conversation with someone, a newer member the other day actually, and he's come from a powerlifting background, which is very structured. Like your program looks exactly the same for 8 to 12 weeks. You know, there's minor changes. You might be lifting at RPE 8 instead of RPE 7 or whatever it is. These very small, minute changes. And he was like, yeah, there's no structure here. And I kind of explained to him, like, it doesn't look like it. You don't see it. But the way we write the program, like I said before, week 1, we do X amount of toes to bar. Week 2, we do X plus 10 toes to bar. So we're just progressively adding it in, but the workout might look completely different.
Yeah.
So
there's a lot more movements to juggle. So for someone coming in from powerlifting, you've got 2 movements. You've got a little bit of accessory work for each movement. There's not much to think about. So you can probably look at it day to day and see consistencies. As where for a program like, let's say, CrossFit or general classes, you need to zoom out to see that.
Yeah, 100%. So, and we try to do that, you know, on our back end. Our members see the workout of the day. When we go in the back end and we see what's up there, we see the week, then we see the month, and then we see the full training cycle. So it's that bigger picture that we often see that people don't see, and that can sort of make things a little bit confusing.
Yeah, and then I suppose tying into individual athletes that maybe are looking to do it as a competitive sport, the structured program is going to be even more important for them.
Yeah, 100%. That's like you're not going to get better without it.
Yeah, and that's kind of accepted. I suppose it's more in the group class scenario where it's not really accepted.
Yeah.
But I think a big separator is that structure. So you do, even if it's just the structure giving you a format to get feedback and then program from that feedback.
Yeah.
So you're able to specifically target the demographic that you're coaching and then maximize what they get out of their session.
Yeah, and that's exactly it, right? I think in terms of general programming or general physical preparedness programming, which is what you would call an affiliate program, the constantly varied, not a whole lot of structure is fine. But if, say, you have someone in that class that wants to progress to being a semi-final athlete or whatever it is, if at some point they have to take a step back and actually start doing CrossFit as a sport and doing programming that looks at CrossFit as a sport where you are progressively adding volume, progressively adding load, and it's quite clear. Take someone who might want to do a ring muscle up, right? If I'm just doing the ring muscle up progressions that are written in the class, I'm probably going to take quite a while to get there. Because the fact of the matter is, like, yes, we can progress the class, but if you are lacking the strength to do a ring muscle up and our progressions are skill based, then you're not working on the thing you need to work on. And unfortunately, in a class circumstance, we have to program to the median, which is, the mean or the middle, whatever it is, the average. And that's where it can be a little bit funky in terms of the group stuff. But as you progress to being higher level or those higher level skills, you do need to start following some structure.
Yeah, and you might need to touch on stuff a bit more, like we just spoke about progressive overload. That one day a week might not be enough for you.
No, exactly. I have athletes at the moment doing skill work for handstand push-ups, ring muscle-ups, bar muscle-ups, and most of them are doing every single one of those twice a week. I try to make them overlap as much as I can, so I try to make ring and bar muscle-ups overlap so that they're not doing 4 muscle-up days a week.
Yeah.
But they have to. You can't just do it once. If you look at bodybuilders, how many days do they train chest a week, right? Like, or how many sets across the week are they doing for a particular muscle group?
Yeah, 16 to 20 depending on the muscle group.
Exactly.
2 days. Look at legs. Legs most likely gonna be 3 days a week.
Yeah. And it's similar. It's similar in that sense for skill. Is you've got to touch on the skill constantly. Yeah. 1 week is probably 1 day a week. Sorry, is probably not enough if you're trying to get there.
Yeah.
I think we've tangented slightly, but we'll try and bring
No,
it back.
I think that ties into the next question. Next question is obviously programming and structure is important, but is intent just as important? So the intent for every session, the intent for the
Yeah.
movements, making sure that you're not kind of just going in with the mindset of I'm here to flog myself and compete.
Yeah.
What is the intent of the session?
Yeah, that's huge, right? So that from a skill perspective and sort of like maybe say a weightlifting perspective, that is so crucial, right? If I write one of my athletes a snatch session, the goal of the session isn't to go in and snatch. It's to go in and dial in certain aspects of their snatch.
Yeah.
So I might write my athlete like a snatch session that consists of some mobility, because most people are tight in that sense, some mobility, then into some positional prep where we are trying to create tension in the right places and we give them cues around that. Then it turns into, okay, so I have someone who struggles to lock out aggressively on their snatch. So we might do snatch balances, drop snatches, those kinds of things, and then take that into their snatch. But if they're not going into that session with the intention of, hey, I'm here to fix my slow lagging lockout, they're probably going to do their snatch balances with a slow lagging lockout.
Yeah.
You know? The intention,
or go too heavy, or
the intention has to be there. So whether it's picking a focus for the session of I am here to get really good at handstand push-ups, or even like outside of CrossFit. I work with a young rugby boy who he's really good, like really, really good, on speed development. Now, when we do his back squats, we're not going slow and grinding through back squats. We're moving fast. We're like putting a high amount of drive through his legs. We do, we might do some like vertical jumps. And while that's just a simple, easy thing, the intention of what he's trying to do is different. So I'm not saying, hey, jump. I'm saying, hey, I want you to get as far away from the ground as you possibly can. Like think about leaping off the earth. And those kinds of things. Coming in and just going through the motions leads to piss poor performance or results.
Yeah, or just stagnation. You see it all the time. People just end up still having the same weaknesses a year later, or still having the same movements they can't do, or they're still doing the same 1 mile run, same time. Like there's a lack of progress. I suppose that ties into program creates the structure, but the intent and execution produces the change.
Yeah, 100%. So
we see it in the group classes. People want to race. Everything is about finishing first. Doesn't matter if they trade off technique. And unfortunately, that's poor execution of intent. And then that leads to no change as well.
Yeah. I think that's actually an important tie into what's the difference between training and competing, right? And I could even take it further and say, what's the difference between exercising, training, and competing?
Yeah.
So, if I'm Nike did a campaign about this a while ago where they're like, I don't exercise, I train, and I really like that because exercising is coming in and sweating for the sake of sweating. Now that's fine. If that's you, I'm not going to gripe at you. I'm not going to tell you any different. I'm not going to rag you. But
it's better than
not
nothing,
doing
anything. Yeah.
But if you come in and you think about training, training is when you come in with a purpose to get better, focused at something. Like, what is my focus for this session? And unfortunately, honestly, it's one of the downsides with CrossFit is competing can take over. So you see it a lot in classes. I saw it the other day. Someone's trying to go so fast that their squats just turning to poo. There's no tension. They're moving like, I keep telling people in classes, like, I want to see you move like a robot. It doesn't mean I want to see you be tight and stiff. I want to see you be smooth and controlled. And whether that's fast or slow, whatever, that doesn't matter. It'll eventually become fast. What I don't want to see is you flopping around like a fish.
Yeah.
All right.
And you want the technique to hold up.
Yeah.
Not change and break down.
And now to put that into context between training versus competing, if I gave you, for simplicity's sake, let's say 50 burpees for time, if you're competing and if you're taking that and you're competing, you're going to be just whatever you got to do to go fast, right? Rep 1 might look completely different to rep 50. But if you're doing that as training, all right, rep 1 should look exactly like rep 50.
Yeah.
And then when it comes down to competing later on, where it's actually competing, rep 1 will look like rep 50, and you will move much, much, much faster, and you will feel much better by the time you finish. So, looping back, training is about picking the focus. What am I trying to get better at? I'm training, right? Training's to get better. So, what am I trying to get better at here? What do I need to do to get better at this thing? And then trying to execute on that within the session. Whereas competing is like, go fast, beat the person next to me.
Yeah.
Roll on floor and
I
die.
think for anyone listening, if you unsure if this is you, just a simple way to look at it: are you winning the class workouts? And then when you put yourself in an event, are you then getting beat by people who you normally beat?
Yeah.
Because chances are you're getting too caught up on competing, and they're working on training.
I mean, one of the big things about that too is, like, psychologically, you cannot flog yourself every day.
No. And that ties into the next question. It's should programs have phases?
100%.
Yeah.
It's the number one and for those who don't know, programming and periodization and structure, phases is periodizing, which is like the backbone of programming, right? You periodize your training, right? So what that means is, say we have a 12-week cycle. Weeks 1 to 4, we might build up on our back squat in terms of
Positions,
positions, positions, endurance, the actual movement itself. Week 5, we might hit a little bit of a test. We might hit a 3RM. We'll deload after that, or that can also be the deload. Deloads being where we don't hit the same kind of volume, or we drop the intensity. Whichever is necessary, and then we slowly build that up again. We talked about it before, progressive overload. So we'll progressively overload the movement in whatever way to stress an adaptation. But what we need after that is time for that adaptation to actually occur. I see it all the time, scrolling Instagram and stuff from different strength accounts, strength coach accounts, and that kind of thing. And it's huge. It's adaptation doesn't occur in the gym. It occurs at home while you sleep, right? So you don't repair and get better in the gym. You get better at home, recovering and relaxing. And that's important, right? So we take you through this journey of, like, the camera, up, down a little bit, up even higher, down a little bit less, up even higher, and then we finally peak for competition, or at the end of the cycle, if it's to hit a 1 rep max back squat or whatever it is. But in terms of psychologically as well, athletes need that. I know for me, if I was competing, if I was at 100% all year round, I would quit before the year, because my brain would be fried.
Yeah.
Like, that is so hard to do. And unfortunately, people don't realize that until it's too late.
You hear the keyword thrown around all the time: balance. Everyone seek balance, and that tends to be in everything. Like the old concept: if you don't go slow, you can't go fast. If all you do is go fast, you actually just sit in the middle. All right. So your body down regulates, and your performance just sits in that middle. So you have this perception of, this is my potential, or this is my top end, but that's just your body holding you back.
Yeah, 100%. Look at it this way, right? And I like this analogy. You get your car serviced, right? Every, what is it, like 30,000 Ks, something like that, okay? All the time now they do. You get your car serviced, and in that service, they change the oil, they check your brakes, they do whatever. You might, if your car's really old, you might get an engine rebuild. You drive a car, right? A general car. If you take a Formula One car or a race car, that car does a race, gets rebuilt, does a race, gets rebuilt, right? So those cars perform at a really, really, really high level, but they still have to be taken apart, rebuilt, and
the trade-off is they wear faster.
Yeah, and that's part of it, right? So if you are coming into the gym and just destroying yourself, you need downtime. You need to recover. If you are a normal car or a normal person or whatever, you still need downtime, right? You need to recover. You need to change your oil. You need to check your brakes, like those kinds of things. And that doesn't mean don't come into the gym. It doesn't mean don't train. It just means sometimes you need to take a step back and not flog yourself.
Change the stimulus.
Yeah,
For
100%.
us, we swim.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
swimming's great. Like deloads the joints. You'll still get the cardiac stimulus of having to breathe half the time while your head's out of the water, and then pump blood, etc. But your joints aren't taking the constant pounding of, say when you run, your feet hitting the pavement, or when you weightlift the bar,
Yeah, your
like
squat
smashing
cleans,
down
your
your shoulders.
snatches, yeah.
So it still does the same thing. You're not going to lose your gains if you take a week off. If anything, you'll come back and you'll actually be fitter.
Yeah, exactly. It helps you stay more balanced too.
Yeah, 100%.
I suppose building off that, we've touched a lot on obviously the athlete and the on the floor side of things. A little bit more into the programming side of things. I would like to ask you some questions around it. What do you find is the hardest part of programming? So for most programs, you'll see a warm up, you'll see maybe some strength work, you'll see some position mobility, you'll see some metabolic conditioning, depending what the athlete's working on. You might see some desaturation EMOMs, trying to work on specific skills, and then there might be some accessory or endurance work on specific muscle groups.
So for me, for writing, depends what I'm writing, right? So if I'm writing a group program, you're programming to the middle, that stuff's okay. In terms of metcon, strength, cardio, you can adjust everybody roughly on the fly. And at the end of the day, you come to terms with that you're not going to get exactly the same stimulus for everybody. It's impossible, all right? That side's okay. The hard part that I find is addressing group weaknesses. So that comes in warm-ups and that comes in skill work. Take you and I as a good example. My front rack's terrible. It takes me 20 minutes to half an hour to be able to put an empty bar in a good front rack position. You can do it straight away.
I can do it cold, yeah.
With no warm-up, right? So those are two different things. Your warm-up probably looks different to my warm-up. But if we're in a class...
For the same workout.
For the same workout. But if we're in a class, the warm-up's what the warm-up is. So finding a way to address the greatest amount of people in the group, like take our classes, for example. I've noticed, so I write our warm-ups, I've noticed that a lot of people have a premature squat and have poor thoracic extension in that squat. So at least 3 times a week in the warm-ups, I'm trying to write something to address that for everybody, because that's what 75% of our members need. The other 25%, they'll benefit from it, but it's not what they need. So helping them sometimes can be a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
Or giving them the thing they need. I see it all the time, especially with this. I look at someone, they're like, I don't feel this. This doesn't, and I'm like, yeah, look, you're part of the 20 to 25% that actually doesn't need to do this.
Yeah, we'd normally have you doing something else.
I can give you something else if you want. That's hard. And then from an individual perspective as well, again, same thing. Warm-ups are hard, but that's more of a thought process thing, because I know what that person needs. I can write it. It's structuring it in a way that helps them. The other hard part is skills. Skill work can be very tough, because I might have a client who they need to get better at their handstands, let's take handstands. I've got to check off a number of boxes, and I've got to prioritize those boxes. So, there's no point in me building your capacity on a handstand if you don't have the shoulder flexion to be able to get into that position.
Yeah.
My coach actually says it, and I really like this quote. Don't layer capacity on top of dysfunction. So dysfunction would be lack of shoulder flexion.
Pick the lowest hanging fruit.
Yeah, I'm not going to build your capacity to walk on your hands if you can't even get into the right position to do so. You might be able to do it with dysfunction, but I don't want to help you do that. I don't want to give you capacity in a muscle up if every rep's a chicken wing, right? So
and a lot of time fixing the dysfunction builds capacity anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Every rep hurts less.
Yeah, 100%. So that's probably it for me is warm-ups and skill work. The rest of it, I can throw a metcon at you and you'll probably get better with it.
Yeah.
it's addressing those two things because they're also quite difficult to measure.
They're very unique too. So
Yes.
each person has different injuries. They've all got different backgrounds. So, like you said, for you and I as a comparison, we have different sporting backgrounds. We got different limitations. I think a bit of advice for the coaches out there. What would you say to them who are on the floor with the athletes?
It's sort of asking the right questions, right? You know, you might have
be okay with giving them something else.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
So ask them the questions that they need to find out. What are they feeling? So actually this is a really good one. All right. Plate carries, overhead plate carry to try and strengthen up some overhead range, some thoracic extension. There is absolutely no point in me giving that to somebody who can't actually get the plate overhead, who say it looks overhead, but you can see they're extending from their lower back. Their wrists are taking the brunt of it. They can barely hold the plate on flat hands overhead. There's absolutely no point in me giving that person that drill, right? So those people, it's okay to go up to them and say, hey, you're actually missing this. I need to take you back to this drill, right?
Yeah.
So for someone like that, it might be a pullover on a bench. So they're back supported by the bench and they're moving overhead and trying to hold their ribs down and maintain that better position while getting there. So that way they're opening the position. And then if it opens up and if it's an acute thing and that opens up within that time frame, give them the plate, let them carry it overhead.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't, get them to keep doing that stuff, build that, and then you can help them. And it's just about having that conversation with them of like, hey, look, we're not there yet, but here's how I'm going to help you get there. And the big thing for coaches, if you've ever struggled to get buy-in from someone, if you can show them that you care and show them that you can help them get to where they need to be, like that, you'll get so much more trust from that person, and you will get much better buy-in.
Yeah, and I think one thing we see with a lot of people on the floor too is like be okay saying, hey, even if you don't know, be like, hey, look, I'm not too sure, but come back next session with an answer. So go back and research, find out, okay, what drill can I use for them, and be okay trying different things. Because as soon as you help them, you've got them.
Yeah.
They'll listen to everything you say.
Yeah. I do that with a lot of people. I've said to them like, hey, listen, I actually don't know, and I'm not comfortable trying to help you by pulling something out of my ass. I won't say it exactly like that, but I'll say I'm not comfortable.
I'll get back
like,
to you.
Well, I'll tell them straight. Like, listen, I don't know, and I'm not comfortable with trying to figure it out on the fly because I won't say I'm scared I'm gonna hurt you, but I'm not comfortable figuring it out on the fly. I'm gonna go and look it up, and I'm gonna go and try and understand it, and I will come back to you with an answer.
You just don't want to waste their time.
Yeah, exactly. And that's it, right? I don't want to waste 30 minutes of someone's time trying to figure something out with them.
Yeah, especially on a maybe.
Yeah, on a maybe. If I'm not sure. If it's a little bit different if I have someone at the moment who's got a bit of shoulder pain when they do certain things. And we had a PT session the other day, and the PT session was trying to figure out where that shoulder pain is coming from.
Yeah.
So that was me figuring out, but it also...
It's a one-on-one scenario. It's also different.
Yeah, exactly.
It's separate from the group class.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a little bit different, but yeah, don't be afraid to say, I don't know. You show a little bit of vulnerability. They're not going to be like, oh my God, this guy's an idiot.
No.
And if they do, then to be honest, they're not the best client. But
yeah, and I do think the biggest mistake you could make is thinking you know everything.
100%. Have you seen the I can't remember what it's called, but it's like a knowledge curve. It's the curve of like expertise. It's like how much you think you know versus how much you know, and it's like how much you think you know, how much you know. And then it gets how much you know, how much you think you know, and like as you learn more, you realize you don't know shit.
Yeah.
And the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know shit. Like, so we see it now a lot in this day and age. People don't know shit, but think they know everything. And be okay with saying I don't know, because that will turn, as coaches, and anybody, that'll turn you into a lifelong learner, which is much better than being ignorant for your whole life.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's a slight tangent, but come back.
Yeah, it's important. I suppose that touches on the coaches, the athletes. My point of advice would be just you will often see a lot of variation in the warm up. So you might have squatting every Monday, but the warm up will be different and target different things. So you might be working some isometrics on the hip flexors. You might be working your 90/90s. The ones that work for you, if you find, okay, that helped my positions in my squat, you need to make note of that.
Yeah.
And you need to be
100%.
like, okay, sweet, this is something that I can use as a staple, maybe until you fix the problem.
Yeah.
And then also, your coaches aren't going to tell you not to do that.
Yeah.
If you go, all right, this really helped me last week, they're going to be like, beautiful, go for it.
Yeah, like, I might see someone doing something that I'm like, hey, that's not in the warm up. And I'll come over and I'll say, hey, what are you doing? I'm not asking that to be like, why the hell aren't you doing my warm up?
Yeah.
I'm saying like, hey, what is that you're doing? Why are you doing it? And I'm asking because I care. And I want to see what you're doing and why you're doing it because
To see the intent.
I want to know how to help you. Yeah. Whereas,
is it just to have a conversation
yeah,
with your friend, or is it to actually warm up?
yeah. So it's important that like you've said, it's important that you do identify those things. I know for me, like before I clean or anything front rack, I have the same stuff I do every single time because it works.
Yeah.
I'm bored of it now, but I know that it works and I know that it's what I need to do to actually open up that position. So I do it every time. And I'm deliberate with it. I pay attention to what I'm doing and it helps. And as time goes on, I'll probably have to do it less and less and less. And then I can start doing some other stuff.
Well, Froning's probably a classic example. Is the same 30-minute routine for everything.
Yeah.
His warm-up before he does anything is the same.
Yeah. So it's find those things that work for you and do them.
Yeah.
And the warm-up is a great time to address your own individual weaknesses. If I don't know if Chris is going to listen to this, but I will give him I don't know if this is a shout out or a dig. Chris has tall man hip flexors, so every time they go into their short length, they cramp.
Yeah.
Now that affects his squatting and a lot of other stuff. So Chris, when you're warming up, it's a really good time to address your hip flexors, and we've spoken about this. Do some holds. They're going to cramp. It's going to happen. But the more you do it, the less it's going to happen and the bit stronger your hips are going to get. So warm up is a really good time to address these little weaknesses, address your imbalances, and then you can focus on the session. I know for me, and I hate warming up. Like I do it. I obviously have to do it.
It's just slower, not as fun.
Yeah. And to me, I'm like, oh, warm up, God. But I know that if I go through, for me, it's about 30 minutes, a 30-minute warm-up to snatch. My positions are going to feel better. My actual snatches are going to feel great. And I'm not going to get frustrated and pissed off when I'm missing lifts and my shoulder hurts, because that's what happens to me, right? My shoulder hurts and I'm like, oh, I hate training. I'm over it. And all it is I didn't warm up and my shoulder was tight, right? And if I actually address that beforehand, I know that the next 12 hours of my day are going to be much better. So warming up properly, I try to think of warm up as trying to address three things, right? So we have to address some blood flow. We have to get blood flowing. We have to address tension. Is this a high tension workout, i.e. are we lifting a lot? Is this a low tension workout? Is it a 30-minute work, like 30 minutes, relatively slow? You don't need to be tight all the time. And then what joint angles do we need? What range of motion do we need? And what positions do we need to be able to get into? And then there's a bit of a specific of like, okay, what are the actual movements we're doing? Let's make sure we do these movements or that pattern. Again, that's very hard to address completely in a class.
Yeah.
But
I think one of the faults a lot of class, like not necessarily coaches listening, probably you see it in your classes too. Say for instance, we got thrusters, pull-ups. All right, nice simple one. Everyone's done them before. Thrusters at 50 kilos. Guys will finish their warm-up, maybe get through their first piece, load their bar to 50, not do any pull-ups, wait for the clock to start.
Yeah.
Right? So they've missed that opportunity to move through that pattern, and then they'll be like, oh, man, my first round was shit. I was so tight. Or it's probably the biggest mistake we see from people in a class scenario is they just – I don't know whether it's I want to conserve energy or it's just laziness.
I think I think it's a little bit of both, right? If you're one of those, if you're someone that gets a round through a workout or 2 rounds into a workout, or says to my athletes all the time, yeah, they're like, yeah, 3 rounds in, I really started to open up and feel good. I'm like, well, you did not warm up enough.
Yeah. And that used to be me when we were training together.
Yeah,
I would just load my bar and get ready to go.
But like if you've ever watched someone at a high level do an open workout or a comp workout, their warm up's like 45 minutes to an hour. I'm sweating by the time I start. I'm like sweating by the time I start doing a competition workout, and that's good. Like,
yeah, they've done 30 thrusters before they're doing their first one.
Exactly. You're not gonna destroy yourself. You're not gonna blow yourself up. You're gonna actually feel better. I'm not saying warm up for 30 minutes, but I'm saying
most people in the class now don't have the time.
No, I'm saying do the movements, make sure things feel good, and you will see a difference throughout the workouts.
I suppose for those that do the class, they don't have that time, or they might get here just before the class starts. So hit the general warm up. One strategy they can use, and one that I use for a lot of my clients, is just making sure there's some discipline with mobility post-workout or cool downs.
Yeah.
That's one of the best strategies you can use, because you will have time after the workout. And it might not be at the gym. You might need to go, but before you go to bed, or just do 10, 15 minutes.
One of the things for me is if you've just done a workout with a ton of squatting, and you finish up the workout and you go and do some squat mobility, whether that's some hip rotations or some hip calves, or just sitting in a deep squat and moving through some active and passive range, you are warmer than when you started, right? So what that means is you're probably in a deeper range than you normally would be. You can strengthen up that range some more, and you're actually kicking that mobility into gear a little bit extra by doing that afterwards and while you're still warm. If I go and do a mobility session, I'm going to go and ride a bike for 10 minutes beforehand.
Yeah.
Because I want some blood flowing. That makes my mobility session a lot more effective than just hanging out. And it's the same thing for the cool down. If you do those stretches and that kind of thing, that cool down is cool down's always going to be effective, but is much more effective in a number of other aspects if you're doing that.
Yeah, and the way it generally plays out for most of us, I mean, I see it, is you just don't have that same stiffness the next day. And then that warm-up where you maybe could only get to 90 in the squat, you can go straight into your full-range squat.
Yeah, 100%.
All right. Yeah, I think this is good. A lot of takeaways there. I suppose the biggest thing is we spoke a little bit about phasing and burnout. What does tend to lead to burnout?
I think it's going too hard too often. Like, to me, that's it. Going too hard too often leads to honestly not seeing results, and that leads to burnout. So you don't see that you're getting better. You see that you're putting in all this, and you think you're
your
putting in...
Your mental state changes.
Yeah, you're putting in all this
negative
effort. You're like, I'm trying so hard. And you're like, why am I not getting better? That's what leads to burnout. But it's not that you're not, trying hard's great, but you're trying hard in the wrong way.
Yeah.
And that I think is what kills people. What doesn't kill people, but what really burns people out. They do too much.
Too much of the same.
Too much of the same. Too much of competing. Too much just trying to ram their head through a wall. All right, as opposed to taking a step back. What is the intention? Actually, I've been talking to some of the people in the Ollie class at the about how that's going. And one of the things they keep saying is, like, people aren't following your percentages. Everyone thinks it's a max out session. And I'm like, stop maxing out. That's not what we want. We want you to hit quality reps at 75 to 80%. And that will make you better when you go and actually try to max out.
And for the viewers watching, that's called narwhaling.
Narwhaling.
Yeah, so Google narwhal and you know exactly what we're talking about.
But yeah, so it's just, like I said, too much of the same, too heavy, too fast, too much competing all the time. Take a step back, slow down, pick something legitimate and real to work on, whether it's speed under the bar, your shapes in your gymnastics, and really dial that in, and you'll see progression at
and
the top
and take the win. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I coach that class, and the biggest thing I see is we do all the drills, we do the extended warm ups. People feel better, so
Mm.
they want to test, and
Yeah,
it's like,
100%.
no, don't test.
Yeah, don't. Don't do that, please. Like, it's like,
Just
it's like,
stick to the
yeah,
numbers.
yeah. Hey, these numbers are there for a reason. Just do it. Like, do it as I'm asking, and I promise you, in 6 weeks,
Yeah.
you're gonna be able to hit that 1 rep max, and it's gonna look better. It's not gonna look like trash, and you're gonna nail it, right? It's just being able to again
That
see
delayed
to
gratification.
see the big
yeah.
picture, delay your gratification, and really work through it. We have to wrap this up because it's
Yeah,
time
I got
to-
one last question just to
okay.
close it off. I think, a lot of burnout is a little bit of everything. So it's a
Mm.
combination of poor warm ups, poor intent, and then no cooldowns. But one thing, if you were to give one piece of advice around programming, what would it be? For example, do you prioritize intent and execution, or is it find a better program?
I think it's prioritize intent and
Because
execution.
program hopping is a big problem.
Man, you know what? Honestly, programs are programs are program. They're all probably going to get you better as long as the person writing it has an idea. All right, and most people writing programs have an idea.
Yeah.
Stick to a program, follow it, and do it with intention, and then you will see benefit. I have a rule that I have to do at least 6 months. If I don't do it anymore, because I have a coach and I'm not going anywhere. But when I was on group programming, it was 6 months. I've got to stick to it for at least 6 months, and then if I'm really unhappy with this, I will change.
Yeah.
But
And I think a nice way to think about it, like the guys at the top of the sport could do any program, and
Oh,
they're probably still going to
100%.
be at the top of sport.
yeah, they could do whatever they could do whatever they want.
Yeah.
In terms of programming, like they'll be fine. Most of those guys do. A lot of them program for themselves.
Yeah.
And they work on weaknesses, they work on strengths, but they
Their
it's-
intent and
intent-
discipline is huge.
yeah,
They
and
call it
that's-
training hygiene.
yeah, exactly. So those are the things that make you better. The program, yes, it's gonna help. A good program will always help, but you don't need to. I think before you go and jump programs, you need to take a look at yourself and
Yeah.
say, okay, well, what could I be doing to make this program more effective? It's the same as recovery. You don't need all the fancy gizmos and all the expensive shit. You just need to go to bed and eat some food and be more intentional with that.
Yeah.
And it's the same with programming. You don't need some fancy program from Matt Fraser or Tia Toomey, sorry.
Yeah,
You
fix
need
the
to pay
things you
attention
can
to what
fix first.
pay attention to what you're doing. Fix all of your things. Fix yourself, and then fix the external thing.
Yeah.
Um,
No, beautiful. I think that's a good way to wrap it up.
yeah, I love it.
All right. Thanks for listening, guys. Take care, and let's see
Next-
some more intent.
Yeah.